The city lights blurred behind the tinted windows of a luxury SUV as the rain fell hard. Inside, a man's voice trembled. "Please, don't hurt me. I can't walk." His suit was drenched, his wheelchair splashed with mud. But what broke hearts wasn't his pain, it was who he was. A billionaire, a CEO, a man who once commanded empires with a single word, now stranded in the middle of nowhere. And then came the sound. Clang, clang, a mechanic's wrench hitting metal. A stranger with oil-stained hands, ripped jeans, and tired eyes walked up to him. No security, no boardroom, just two broken souls standing in the rain, one who lost his power and one who never had any. No one knew that night would change both their lives forever. Because sometimes, it's the man with grease on his hands who teaches the man in the suit what strength really means. Rain hammered against the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists, blurring the neon lights of the city that once obeyed his every command. Malcolm Gray sat inside his sleek black SUV, staring blankly through the glass as thunder rolled across the sky. His reflection looked nothing like the man who had graced magazine covers and business journals. His once sharp suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, and his eyes empty. The world called him the unstoppable CEO, the man who built Gray Tech from a cramped garage into one of the biggest renewable energy corporations in America. But that was before the accident, before the night when a single crash stole his ability to walk and the empire he'd built began to crumble beneath the weight of greed, betrayal, and pity. He pressed his trembling hand against his thigh, the muscle there lifeless, unresponsive. A year had passed, but every night he still tried, still hoped. The pain wasn't just physical, it was humiliation. People no longer looked at him like a leader, they looked at him like a tragedy. Tonight was supposed to be different. He had agreed to meet a group of investors in a quiet suburban warehouse, desperate to convince them not to pull out of his company. His driver had taken a wrong turn, the engine sputtered, and then the car had died completely on an empty road that stretched into nothing but darkness. The rain grew heavier. The driver got out to check the hood, but when the lightning flashed, Malcolm saw two silhouettes appear on the side of the road, men with tattoos creeping up their necks, walking closer. His pulse spiked. "Jared?" he called, voice shaking. No answer. The driver's door slammed. A shadow moved toward the window. "Please," Malcolm whispered, fumbling for the wheelchair lever. "Please don't hurt me. I can't walk." The man outside just smirked. The second one circled to the back of the car, tapping on the trunk with something metallic. The CEO's breath hitched. He had survived boardroom wars, corporate takeovers, even spinal surgery. But this? Out here? Alone and vulnerable? He was terrified. Then came the sound. Clink, 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 a rhythmic tapping, different from the men's approach. It came from somewhere behind the car. Both strangers turned their heads. Out of the rain walked a man in a worn-out jacket, jeans stained with oil, holding a rusted wrench like it was part of his arm. His hair was soaked, his boots splashing through puddles, but his eyes, sharp, calm, unreadable. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice steady but low. The tattooed one chuckled. "Ain't your business, man. Move along." The stranger didn't move. He just tilted his head slightly, looking at the car, then at Malcolm, whose terrified face reflected in the glass. "That man looks scared," the stranger said quietly. "Looks like my business to me." For a long second, no one moved. Then lightning flashed again, bright enough to show the glint of metal in the taller man's hand. The mechanic dropped his wrench deliberately into the mud. "Is that a good idea?" he asked. The silence that followed was heavier than the thunder. The two men exchanged glances, then turned and disappeared into the rain, muttering curses as they went. When the night grew quiet again, the stranger picked up his wrench and knocked gently on the car window. "You all right in there?" Malcolm exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. His voice was fragile. Yeah, I think so. My driver, he ran off." The mechanic opened the driver's side door and peered under the hood. "Car's flooded," he muttered. "You're lucky I was closing my shop nearby. Roads get nasty when it rains this hard." Malcolm's breath trembled as he tried to adjust his chair.
"I can't walk," he said quietly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to—" The man waved a hand. "No need to apologize. I've seen tougher nights." He leaned into the car and looked at him directly for the first time. The CEO noticed the man's face, young, maybe early 30s, strong features, a scar running along his jaw. His hands were rough, his nails blackened with grease, but there was something deeply human in his eyes, something most of the men in the Malcolm's boardroom never had. "Name's Darius," he said. "Mechanic. You?" Malcolm hesitated, then forced a small smile. "Malcolm Gray." The mechanic blinked, the name clicking somewhere in his mind. "Gray Tech? That Malcolm Gray?" The CEO nodded weakly. "Used to be." Darius exhaled slowly, stepping back. "You're the guy who made solar panels affordable for half this city." He looked down the empty road, then back at the car. "Funny how life throws people around, huh?" Malcolm almost laughed, but it came out broken. "Yeah, funny." It took Darius nearly 20 minutes to restart the SUV, reconnecting wires, replacing a fuse, and coaxing the engine to life. When he was done, he stood there drenched, breathing hard. "You're good to go," he said finally, wiping his hands on his jacket. Malcolm rolled down the window, his voice softer. "I don't have cash on me, but give me your number. I'll make sure you're compensated." Darius shook his head. "Don't need money. Just try to get home safe." But the CEO wasn't done. Something in that man's quiet decency struck him deeply. "Wait," he said. Do you repair companies?" Darius raised an eyebrow. "Companies? I might have a job, if you're willing to work hard. I mean really hard. I could use someone like you." The mechanic gave a dry smile. "I fix cars, Mr. Gray, not corporations. You fix things that are broken, right? Right now, that's exactly what I need." Darius didn't respond right away. He just looked at the CEO, the wheelchair, the exhausted face, the eyes of a man who had seen too much loss. Then he nodded once. "All right," he said simply. "Let's see what's broken." 2 weeks later, Darius walked into the massive glass-walled building of Gray Tech. Everything gleamed, from the marble floors to the holographic displays that once symbolized innovation. But behind the glass and technology, there was silence. The company was dying. Malcolm sat behind his desk, papers scattered, investors threatening to pull out, and employees whispering doubts. The man who once ran a global empire now couldn't even get a loan approved. "You sure about this?" Darius asked, standing across from him, still in his oil-stained jacket. Malcolm nodded slowly. "I don't need another executive. I need someone who understands problems from the ground up." The mechanic chuckled. "Then you called the right man." Their first project together was chaos. Systems were failing, production had stopped, and workers were quitting. Darius didn't have a degree, but he had instinct. He walked through the factory floor, talking to technicians, studying the machines, learning how everything connected. Within days, he found what the engineers had missed for months, a calibration issue in the new solar processors that was draining energy efficiency. When he fixed it, the lights came back on, literally and figuratively. For the first time in months, Malcolm smiled. "You just saved me $2 million, he said. Darius shrugged. "Just did what I do." But there was more to it. The CEO saw something rare: honesty, simplicity, and a kind of courage that couldn't be bought. He started bringing Darius into meetings, asking his opinion. The board members scoffed at first. "A mechanic? This is business, not a garage." Malcolm looked them dead in the eye. "That mechanic sees problems you people ignore." In time, Darius's ideas began reshaping Gray Tech. He redesigned their solar converters using cheaper, locally sourced components, saving millions. He pushed for hiring local engineers instead of expensive foreign consultants. The company slowly began breathing again. And through it all, a friendship began forming, an unlikely bond between two men from different worlds. Darius never treated Malcolm like a cripple or a boss. He treated him like a man. He pushed him, argued with him, made him laugh. One night as they sat in the office, looking out over the city, Malcolm said quietly, You know, when I lost my legs, I thought I lost everything. But maybe I was supposed to lose something to find what really matters. Darius looked at him, smiling faintly. Sometimes God breaks you down to rebuild you right. Malcolm nodded slowly. You really believe that? Darius said, I've seen enough engines to know one thing. Sometimes the only way to fix something is to take it apart completely first. Malcolm looked at him with gratitude. Then I guess it's time we rebuild everything. Outside, the rain had stopped.
Weeks turned into months, and the once bleeding heart of Graytech began to beat again. The floors that once echoed with silence now hummed with energy. New machines, new teams, and a new spirit filled the air, all built on the bond between two men the world would have never placed in the same room. Malcolm's name started appearing in business columns again, not as a fallen mogul, but as a man making an impossible comeback. But what none of the journalists knew was that behind every board decision, every strategy, every second chance, stood Darius, the mechanic who never wore a suit. They worked side by side, day and night. Darius's hands were always blackened with grease or graphite, while Malcolm's rested in his wheelchair controls, sketching ideas on digital tablets. Together, they redesigned Graytech's future. Clean, sustainable, affordable. One night, long after everyone had gone home, Darius found Malcolm staring at an old photo on his desk, one of him standing with a woman and a young girl. The man in the photo was smiling, strong, proud, a version of Malcolm that didn't exist anymore. "She was my wife," Malcolm said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "And my daughter, Maya. They left after the accident. Said I wasn't the same man anymore. Truth is, they were right." Darius leaned against the door frame, saying nothing. Malcolm took a deep breath, his eyes distant. "I used to think success was about control, owning everything, commanding everyone. But when I lost control of my legs, I lost control of everything else, too. People I trusted stole from me. Friends disappeared. Even my own family looked at me with pity." He laughed bitterly, then looked up at Darius. "You're the first person in a long time who looked at me and didn't see a broken man." Darius shook his head gently. "You ain't broken, Malcolm. You're just rebuilding." The CEO smiled faintly. "You really believe that?" "I do," Darius said. "You helped me believe in myself, too. I was just fixing cars, man, trying to feed my kid, trying to stay out of trouble. Nobody ever told me I could build something bigger. Until you did." Malcolm's eyes softened. "You have a kid?" "Yeah," Darius nodded. "Little boy, Jaden. He's 6. Smart as hell. Always asking questions, always messing with wires. His mama passed 2 years ago, so it's just me and him now." Something in the air shifted between them. Two men from two worlds sharing the same kind of pain. Loss, survival, and the quiet courage to keep going. The days that followed blurred into a storm of work and redemption. Darius became more than an employee. He was Malcolm's right hand. But just as things began to stabilize, new trouble emerged. A rival company, Solar X, accused Graytech of patent theft, a lie meant to destroy them. Overnight, stock prices plunged. The media swarmed. Investors threatened to pull out again. Malcolm's face returned to the front page, but this time under headlines like "Fallen CEO Faces Scandal Again." In the boardroom, chaos reigned. Executives shouted, lawyers argued, and Malcolm sat quietly in his chair, staring out the window. He could feel it, the fear creeping back, the helplessness, the humiliation. Finally, he raised a hand. "Enough," he said softly, and the room fell silent. "If SolarX wants a war, they'll get one. But not like this. Not through shouting or panic. We'll fight with truth."
He turned to Darius. "We'll find proof that those patents are ours from the design files, the prototypes, everything you worked on. You ready?" Darius nodded once. Always. For days, they dug through old drives, designs, and data logs. Darius even went back to his old shop to retrieve notebooks filled with sketches from the night he first started helping Greatech. When the court hearing came, the air was thick with tension. The opposing lawyers smiled smugly, expecting to crush the company once and for all. But when Darius stepped forward to testify, something unexpected happened. He wasn't a polished speaker. He stumbled a bit, wiped his hands nervously on his pants, but every word came straight from his heart. "I ain't no scientist, but I know how machines work. I designed the fix that made Greatech's panels more efficient. You're saying we stole it? Then explain this."
He held up his old grease-stained notebook, flipping to a dated sketch with his signature and the same schematic SolarX claimed as theirs. "I made this month before they even filed that patent. Check the timestamp. Check my email to Mr. Gray. It's all there." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The opposing lawyer stammered. Malcolm's eyes glistened as he watched the man who once fixed his car, now saving his empire. By the end of the day, the judge ruled in their favor. Greatech was cleared. SolarX was fined for defamation. The media erupted. Headlines changed overnight. CEO's unlikely ally saves Greatech from collapse. But Malcolm didn't care about the headlines anymore. He cared about one thing, the quiet pride in Darius's eyes when he said, "Told you I could fix things." That night, they returned to the office together. The lights of the city glowed below them. Malcolm wheeled closer to the glass, watching the reflection of the man who had changed his life. "Darius," he said quietly, "you ever think about running your own company?" The mechanic laughed. "Me? I barely graduated high school." Malcolm smiled. "So did Henry Ford, so did Thomas Edison. You've got vision. You see what others miss." He rolled closer, his tone serious. "I want to make you my partner." Darius froze. "Partner? Like co-owner?" "Exactly," Malcolm said. "You've earned it." For a long time, Darius said nothing. His eyes glistened. "You really mean that?" "I've never meant anything more in my life." That night, in a quiet office high above the city, two men shook hands, one with oil-stained fingers, one with a trembling but steady grip. And from that handshake, a new chapter of Greatech was born. Months later, Greatech launched its biggest innovation yet, Project Reignite, a global initiative to bring affordable solar power to communities that had never had electricity. They started with one, a small rural town on the edge of Georgia where children studied under streetlights because their homes were dark. Malcolm sat in his wheelchair on a small stage with Darius beside him as the crowd cheered and the lights flickered to life for the first time. Children laughed, parents cried, and even the sky seemed to open as the sun broke through the clouds. Reporters rushed forward, flashing cameras, asking questions. One shouted, "Mr. Gray, what inspired this project?" Malcolm smiled and turned to Darius. "Him," he said simply, "a mechanic who taught me what real power looks like." The crowd applauded. Later, as they walked away from the stage, Darius looked at him, half smiling. "You sure you're ready for all this attention again, boss?" Malcolm chuckled. "I'm not the boss anymore. We both are." They laughed quietly, the sound of friendship echoing above the hum of the new solar lights. As the sun dipped behind the hills, Malcolm looked out over the glowing town. "You know," he said softly, "the night I met you, I thought my life was over. I was sitting in that car, terrified, broken. I said, 'Please don't hurt me, I can't walk.'" He paused, turning to Darius with tears in his eyes. "But you didn't just not hurt me, you healed me." Darius placed a hand on his shoulder. "Nah, man, you healed yourself. I just handed you the wrench." They stood there for a long time, two silhouettes against a rising sun, proof that sometimes salvation doesn't come from money or fame or miracles. It comes from people, the ones who see the human inside the pain. And from that day on, the world didn't just know Greatech as a corporation. They knew it
as the company that was rebuilt by a man who couldn't walk and a mechanic who wouldn't stop walking beside him.